right. All righty. Okay. The date, November 7th, 1926. The time. Well, it wasn't Monday Night Football. It was at the Polo Grounds, so I'm going to say it was about 2:30 in the afternoon. Normally, the Giants football games were played about 2:30 in the afternoon when they played at home at the Polo Grounds. The teams, the Chicago Cardinals at the New York Giants, and the place, like I mentioned, the Polo Grounds. This would be the first time that the Giants and the Chicago Cardinals would face off. They didn't face each other in 1925. 1925 be very, very good, in a way, to the Chicago Cardinals. Very controversial, which I'm going to go over. The Chicago Cardinals, although they didn't start out as the Chicago Cardinals. However, the Chicago Cardinals, I'm going to read a little bit here. They're the oldest team in the NFL. They started in 1898. Them and the Chicago Bears are the oldest teams. The NFL, or the American Professional Football Association, which was in 1920 and 1921. The Chicago Bears and the Chicago Cardinals were founding members in 1920. The Packers came in 1921, and then the Giants came in, obviously, 1925. So the Giants are the fourth oldest, right, as far as the NFL is concerned. Although in 1920, they weren't the Chicago Bears. They were the Decatur Staleys. 1921, they became the Chicago Staleys. In 1922, they became the Chicago Bears. But the Chicago Cardinals are the oldest team in the NFL. As I said, they started off in 1898. Very old, very old. All right, a professional American football team known as the Arizona Cardinals. Previously played in Chicago, Illinois as the Chicago Cardinals from it wasn't known in 1898, but from 1898 to 1959. In 1960, they relocated to St. Louis. What happened was in the Cardinals, they were actually they won two championships. 1925, which once again they really didn't win. It was very controversial, but they wound up being crowned the winners. And then they won in 1947. They beat the Philadelphia Eagles 28-21 in Chicago. Wound up being a very, very, very entertaining game. I believe the Cardinals scored a touchdown in every quarter. The Eagles scored a touchdown in every quarter but one. It was 28-21. It was, it wound up being, it was very, 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 not that I saw it, but reading about it and seeing video of it, very entertaining game. But then the Cardinals went back to the championship in 1948, and basically in a blizzard at Shibe Park in Philadelphia, the Eagles would prevail on a Steve Van Buren 4-yard or 5-yard run. I think it was like in the fourth quarter. They would win 7-0, but it was like in a blizzard. But so the Cardinals have not had much success. 1925, 1947. So anybody, a Cardinal fan out there, you've had a drought since most Cardinal fans aren't even alive the last time the Cardinals won the championship, which was in 1947. So, but you said they've been around the longest now. But what happened? It was in the 50s. Is their team just started, was not very good. And as I said, in the late 40s, they were a good team. Once the 50s hit, they were very bad, and the attendance was absolutely horrible, and they were trying to move, but they didn't really have a lot of money to be able to move. Well, what wound up happening was after the 1959 season in they had two teams in Chicago. 1960, the AFL was formed, and what the NFL tried to do, and actually I guess it worked out, kind of to block the AFL from putting a team in St. Louis, where it's very, very the fan base is there is just phenomenal. That they don't have a basketball team in there, but they got the hockey team, baseball team. They used to have a football team, But I mean, the fans there are just a great place. So basically, the NFL took them from Chicago, where their attendance was very, very bad, and put them in St. Louis, kind of to block the AFL from putting a team in St. Louis. And it worked. It worked. So that's why after 1959, the Cardinals went from Chicago to St. Louis. But let's see. The roots for the Cardinals can be traced back to 1898, when Chris O'Brien established an amateur Chicago-based athletic team, the Morgan Athletic Club. O'Brien later moved them to Chicago's Normal Park and renamed them the Racine Normals, then adopting the maroon color from the University of Chicago uniforms. In the 1920s, the Cardinals became part of the professional circuit in Chicago. The Cardinals, along with the Chicago Bears, were founding members of the National Football League in 1920, although the Chicago Bears were the Decatur Staleys in 1920. Both teams are the only two surviving teams from that era, from 1920. The Bears and the Cardinals also developed a rivalry during the NFL's first years because they were both from Chicago, obviously. Let's see the early history here. In 1898, Chicago painting and building contractor Chris O'Brien established an amateur Chicago-based athletic club football team named the Morgan Athletic Club. O'Brien later moved them to Chicago's Normal Park and renamed them the Racine Normals. Say with the Normal Park. Since Normal Park was located on Racine Avenue in Chicago, right? The Racine Normals. The Racine, that'd be the street that they were located on, and the Normals was the name of the park that they played at. Makes sense, right? In 1901, O'Brien bought some used uniforms from the University of Chicago, the colors of which had been faded, leading O'Brien to exclaim, "That's not maroon." The University of Chicago, then the colors were maroon, but the colors were faded, right? And he said, "That's not maroon, it's cardinal red." So it was then that the team changed its name to the Racine Street Cardinals. You know, the Racine, that's the name of the street, so the Racine Street Cardinals. The original Racine Street Cardinals team disbanded in 1906, mostly for lack of local competition. A professional team under the same name formed in 1913, claiming the previous team as part of their history. So, as was the case for most professional football teams, in 1918, the team was forced to suspend operations for a second time due to World War I and the outbreak of the Spanish flu pandemic. It was resumed operations later in the year, one of the few teams to play that year, and has since operated continuously. In the 1920s, at the time of the founding of the modern National Football League, the Cardinals were part of a thriving professional football circuit based in the Chicago area. Teams such as the Decatur Staleys, the Hammond Pros, the Chicago Tigers, and the Cardinals had formed an informal loop similar to and generally on par with the Ohio and New York circuits that also emerged as top football centers prior to the league's founding. In 1920, the team became a charter member of the American Professional Football Association, later renamed the National Football League in 1922. And the franchise fee was $100. That's what it cost the Cardinals to enter the American Professional Football Association. The Cardinals and the Bears, the later founded as the Decatur Staleys, moving to Chicago in 1921 and being renamed the Chicago Staleys, then in 1922 being renamed the Chicago Bears, are the only charter members of the NFL still in existence. Basically, the only two teams that started in 1920 that are still in existence. There were 14 teams in 1920. And they're the only two. 1921, it went up to 21 teams, and the Green Bay Packers were one of those teams. So the Green Bay Packers missed being a charter member of the NFL by 1 year. Let's see. The Green Bay Packers, which joined the league in 1921, existed prior to the formation of the NFL, but they were not in the NFL though. But they were around. The person keeping the minutes of the first league meeting, unfamiliar with the nuances of Chicago football, recorded the Cardinals as from Racine, Wisconsin. The team was renamed the Chicago Cardinals in 1922 after a team actually from Racine, Wisconsin, entered the league. That season, the team moved to Comiskey Park. So, I mean, the Cardinals, they've been around for a long, long time. Now, 1925, right? They wind up winning the, very, very controversial. Something like this obviously would never happen in the NFL nowadays. But what did wind up happening, let's see if I can pop this up here. Is this, okay, here we go. So what wound up did happening, okay, was 1925. I got 7,000 tabs open here. Is that it? 1925, okay. Was the Pottsville Maroons, all right, and the Chicago Cardinals were like the cream of the crop in 1925. Basically, it kind of came down to a game. It was on December 6th. Actually, it was the same. That was a big game in NFL, in the history of the NFL. December 6th, 1925 was also the day that Red Grange and the Bears played in the Polo Grounds. I did a video on that. And basically kind of might have possibly saved the Giants because they made so much money in that game. The Giants had lost a lot of money during the regular season, and they made up money. They made up a ton of money in that one game because of Red Grange. So December 6, 1925 in NFL history was a big, big day. But anyway, on December 6, 1925, the Pottsville Maroons faced off against the Chicago Cardinals. Basically, whoever wound up winning would basically would have the leg up, shall we say, in the NFL. And basically, the season was almost pretty much over at that particular point in time. But so the Pottsville Maroons wound up beating the Chicago Cardinals 21-7. So that gave the Pottsville Maroons a record of 10-2-0. The Chicago Cardinals had a record of 9-2-1. So the team that would win the championship had the team, not so much the team with the most wins, because back in 1925, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets played 20 games. They had the most wins. They had 13 wins. So if it was the team that had the most wins wind up winning the championship, well, it would be the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. However, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets were 13-7. Their winning percentage was .650. The the Pottsville Maroons, after they beat the Chicago Cardinals, the Pottsville Maroons record was 10-2. Their winning percentage was .833. All right. So this is where it starts getting a little interesting. And you can make cases for both teams to win. This is 1925. This has nothing to do with this game I'm talking about, right? But it's just so interesting. As I said once, only stuff like this would happen back in the 20s. It ain't never in the 1920s. It would never happen nowadays. But what happened after the game was over with was the Cardinals. They went out and they played or they set up. They set up 2 additional games after this Pottsville Maroon game. The way they were set up was back in the day. You can add games up and you can be in December and still add games to your schedule. So basically, that's what the Cardinals did. After they lost to the Pottsville Maroons and they had their record, their winning percentage was worse than the Pottsville Maroons. What they did was they went out and they just added on a couple games. Now they added 2 games on. One was the Milwaukee Badgers and the other one was the Hammond Pros. So they played two games. One was on December 10th. The other one was on December 12th. They played basically the Milwaukee Badgers had kind of like almost had a horrible season. I mean, they were, let's see, what were they? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Well, because they were 0-6. I mean, they were horrible. Absolutely horrible. And the Hammond Pros, the Cardinals set up another game with the Hammond Pros. The Hammond Pros were 1-4. I mean, they were horrible too. But the thing is that the Milwaukee Badgers, their season had been over with, and the Chicago Cardinals did not think that the Milwaukee Badgers could come up with enough players to field a team. So if they can't field the team, right, they can't play a game. So then the Cardinals couldn't get a win. So what they wound up doing was, they went and they got 4 high school kids from a local high school. There's a story instead of me just reading it because it's a nice long story. So they wound up getting 4 high school players to play for the Milwaukee Badgers illegally. Now they didn't pay them, but I believe that those high school players were banned from playing in the NFL because they were, they were amateurs and they were playing on a professional level. But what the Cardinals told these high school players was this was basically like a pickup game. It was just like a scrimmage, a practice. It was a practice. They didn't play. Apparently, they didn't pay the high school players, and they just kind of what I'm reading is that they told these high school players it's like a practice. Right? So you want to come and play against us? It doesn't count. It's nothing. This, that, and the other thing. So they got 4 high school players, added them to the Milwaukee Badgers lineup. So the Milwaukee Badgers then therefore had enough players to play the game, and the Cardinals won 59-0. It was a total it was a joke, absolute joke. Then what they did is 2 days later after that, they played the Hammond Pros and they beat them 13-0. Well, the thing was with the Hammond Pros hadn't played since November 1st. Now, this was December 12th. So it was almost the Hammond Pros hadn't played in almost a month and a half. And they were a bad team. And they and the Cardinals wound up beating them 13-0. So due to these 2 games that the Cardinals added on against these 2 really weak, inferior opponents, the Cardinals wound up with a record of 11-2-1 and a winning percentage of .846. Now this is where it gets kind of interesting, as if that's not interesting enough. The Pottsville Maroons, right? They had a record of 10-2. And a winning percentage of .833. Well, they set up. They had after the season was over with, they set up 2 exhibition games. One was on December 12th, which was a Saturday at Shibe Park against the Notre Dame All-Stars, which was Shibe Park, which is in Philadelphia. They would wind up winning that game 9-7. And then the following Sunday, they played the Atlantic City Roses. These are exhibition games, and it would win that game 6-0. The problem is that on December 12th, 1925, the Pottsville Maroons, right? They played a game against the Notre Dame All-Stars at Shibe Park in Philadelphia, which just happened to be the same time when it was on a Saturday when the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets played a home game. And they were interfering with their territorial rights, and you couldn't do that on the same day. Now, they had to play on Saturday because the blue laws were in effect. And in Philadelphia, you couldn't play football on Sunday. So for whatever reason, the Chicago Cardinals came up with a game to face Notre Dame on a Saturday, which was the same time, the same day that the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets played, and it interfered with their territorial rights, and you couldn't do that. So word got out, obviously, that they played the game they should never have. And the commissioner Carr, he wound up disbanding, he took away. He said that, they couldn't play in the league anymore. He fined them, and basically eliminated them from any any chance of winning the championship. So he basically got rid of their team, but he allowed the Cardinals, who illegally got 4 high school players, and he found out that the Cardinals brought in 4 high school players illegally. And also the thing is that when the Pottsville Maroons, they played a college team, it had nothing to do with the NFL. Nothing to do with the NFL. It just had infringed on the territorial rights of the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. That's all. It had nothing to do with the NFL. No implications on any games or anything like that. The Cardinal game had implications on the NFL because the game counted in the standings. So the Cardinals went out and illegally got 4 high school players to play for a team, and they went out and beat them, and it had implications on the standings. So Carr, for whatever reason, he fined, I think, the Cardinals, and he was going to take away, I think it was the 2 wins that they wound up having, but the victories counted. If you look in the standings, the Cardinals are 11-2-1. So basically, the Cardinals, you can go either way. The Cardinals went out and illegally got 4 high school amateurs to play for a team, which they should not have. And those wins counted. But that was, in Carr's mind, that was okay. He didn't suspend the team or nothing like that. He let that happen. But meanwhile, the Pottsville Maroons, who played a college game against a college team, had no implications on the standings. He got rid. He suspended them and kicked them out of the league and everything. Fined them and kicked them out of the league. So that doesn't make any sense to me. If you're going to suspend Pottsville or kick them out of the league, you should be kicking the Cardinals out of the league as well too. But it didn't work out like that. The Cardinals wound up with a record of 11-2-1. If you look in the standings, these final 2 games, the ones against the Milwaukee Badgers and the Hammond Pros, both those games counted in the standings, and the Pottsville Maroons basically kind of got screwed because they played a football game within the territory of Frankfurt. So it is what it is. But the Chicago Cardinals, that's how they wound up winning in 1925. They were a very good team. The Chicago Cardinals, without question, were a very, very good team. As I said, the Cardinals and the Giants didn't face each other in 1925, so this would be the first time that they did. Now, the interesting thing, the Cardinals started off really, really good in 1926. They didn't wind up. The Cardinals in 1926 won their first 4 games. Then they lost to the Bears 16-0, and then they beat the Milwaukee Badgers 3-2. So the Cardinals at one point stood 4-0, and then they stood 5-1. But then after that, they lost 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They lost 5 of their final 6 games, and the other game they tied. They were just getting killed. They lost to the Yellow Jackets 33-7. They got shut out. They were constantly getting shut out. So I'm not exactly sure what happened to the Chicago Cardinals in the second half of this 1926 season, but they started off really good. They started off 5-1. They were right in the championship race and everything like that. It just, for whatever reason, they lost 5 of their final 6 games. And I said in the other game, they tied the Chicago Bears 0-0. So they started 5-1. They finished 5-6-1. So now the Giants, on the other hand, they kind of started this season pretty much like they did in 1925. 1925, the Giants started off 0-3. They lost to the Providence Steamroller, first game ever, right? Then they lost back-to-back games against the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets. They played Saturday, October 17th. They played Sunday, October 18th. Back-to-back Jacks. And a lot of these guys played 60 minutes. So a lot of these guys played 60 minutes Saturday. They played 60 minutes Sunday. Unlike today, right? But the Giants in 1925 and 26 started quite similar. I said 1925, the Giants started off 0-3. they would finish the season 8-4. So they won 8 of their final 9 games. At one they were 0-3, and at one point they went from 0-3 to 7-3. So they won 7 games in a row. Then they would lose December 6th. They would lose to the Chicago Bears 19-7, putting them at 7-4. And then the final game, December 13th, 1925, the Giants would go into Chicago and win 9-0. So they would finish off at 8-4. Their record in 1926 was almost straight on. It's just the same. They finished, instead of 8-4 in 1925, they finished the 1926 season 8-4-1. They played one extra game. Actually, they played a few games, but some of them were exhibition games. But a lot of it was kind of like the same as it was in 1925. How the Giants started off 0-3 in 1925. Well, let's go here. Where are we at here? 1926, the Giants would win their first 2 games. Then they would lose their next 3. Then they would beat the Kansas City Cowboys, and then they would tie the Canton Bulldogs. So the Giants started off 2-0. Then they lost their next 3, so they fell to 2-3. Then they beat the Cowboys, and they were 3-3, and then they had a tie, so they were 3-3-1. So they were. In the beginning of 1925, they didn't do real well, and in the first half, shall we say, of 1926, they were 3-3-1. Then they would go on on a roll. They would win all their remaining games, starting here against the Chicago Cardinals. They would win 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. They would win 5 out of their final 6 games. Their only loss would be to the Los Angeles Buccaneers, who are a traveling team. Nobody went out to Los Angeles to play them. The Los Angeles Buccaneers were a traveling team, so the Giants lost at home to them. So, but other than that, the Giants would win all their remaining games. So, kind of like what they did in 1925, the Giants kind of did in 1926. The second half of the season, the Giants really gelled and really did good. The last game the Giants played was on Election Day. This is the second season in a row. Election Day was on Tuesday. I'm not sure what it is. It wasn't Tuesday Night Football. I'm not sure what it is, but 1925 they played on Election Day. On Tuesday. 1926 they played on Tuesday on Election Day. They played the Canton Bulldogs, which was the last video that I just did in this little series here. They tied the Canton Bulldogs 7-7 on Tuesday, November 2nd, 1926. The Giants were up 7-0, and the Canton Bulldogs scored a touchdown in the fourth quarter on kind of a freaky kind of play. But now the Giants, this is Sunday. So this is Sunday, November 7th, and the Giants are facing the Chicago Cardinals at the Polo Grounds. But they said that, the Cardinals were, for whatever reason, the second half of the season, they were just not good at all. Not good at all. Now, of course, let's see here. In 1926, the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets would wind up winning. They were 14-1-2. The Chicago Bears are very good as well, too. They were 12-1-3. So, but the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets in 1926 won the overall title because they were 14-1. The Bears were 12-1. The Frankfurt Yellow Jackets had a winning percentage of .933. The Bears, with a record of 12-1, .923. So the Frankfurt Yellow Jackets, they would wind up prevailing. So I got here. I got a couple articles here that I'm going to wind up reading here that talk about this game here. All right, we got this is from the New York Times. It says, the football Giants trample Chicago. Hinkie Haynes scores 2 touchdowns in a 20-0 victory. One of them was on an 80-yard gallop. New York line is firm. Cardinals gain only on passes, but failed to break through defense when near the goal. All right, so let's see. The New York Football Giants were far too strong for the Chicago Cardinals in yesterday's game at the Polo Grounds. About 10,000 spectators sat in the gray shadows of the baseball stands until the lights were turned on and the New Yorkers had left the field on the long end of a 20-0 score. Hinkie Haynes scored two of the New York Giants touchdowns, one on a running catch of a forward pass and the other on an 80-yard run from scrimmage. Alexander added the third when he intercepted a pass almost on the Chicago goal line. Chicago, arrayed in Cardinal jerseys and gray helmets that outshone the conventional crimson ones introduced by Harvard, kicked off to open the festivities. McBride, starting from the 24-yard line, jammed into the line for a first down after 3 attempts, and then slammed through a big hole at the right guard for 20 more. Here, the Cardinals braced and forced a punt by Kopech. It was well placed and went out on the 5-yard line. Now, Kopech did not play for the Giants in 1925, but he was from Columbia. He was a very good collegiate star, very good collegiate star. Then says Swanson dropped back to punt, and Haynes brought the kick back 10 yards to the 35-yard mark. McBride soon after tossed a pretty pass off left end. Haynes, running hard, took the ball over his head and continued on for 20 yards and the score. So McBride passed to Hinkie Haynes for a touchdown. He had wind enough. He had wind enough left to hold the ball for McBride's placement. So Haynes held the ball for McBride, who kicked the extra point. And it was good, but holding in the New York line cost the extra point. Aha. So that's why they only scored 6 points. That's why they got to 20. They scored 3 touchdowns. 2 of them, the extra points were good. And this one here, the extra point was good, but the holding penalty on the Giants cost them the extra point. Now, I'm not sure if the holding penalty just eliminates the extra point. That I don't know. Or if the holding penalty moved them back 10, 15 yards and they tried another miss and he missed it. That I don't know. But due to a holding penalty, actually wound up costing the Giants the extra point. Says the second quarter, they only scored one touchdown in the whole first half. Says the second quarter saw no scoring and very little exciting play. Haynes makes great dash. The second half wasn't very old before Haynes turned in a sensational gallop. Haynes was a very fantastic athlete. He also played professional baseball as well. So he was with the Giants, but he was a very, very good athlete from Penn State. He scored the first 2 touchdowns in Giants history. He scored when they beat the Cleveland Bulldogs in 1925. He scored their first 2 touchdowns ever. But so Hinkie Haynes was a very, very good athlete. Let's see here. Starting from scrimmage and sliding perilously along the right-hand sidelines until he was clear of the opposition and crossing the goal line with no one at all near him, McBride added the extra point easily. After the kickoff, McBride and Haynes apparently were on their way to another rapid score when they covered 35 yards on 5 drives at the line between them. However, McElwain intercepted a pass, and then Chicago started its first offense on the day, an aerial offense that carried them straight into the mouth of the New York goal. Okay. Chicago passes worked a bit again in the fourth quarter, but there was too much power in the New York lineup. McBride was slowed up a bit by injuries, and Haggerty went in to freshen things up. He turned in a 35-yard run to Chicago's 24-yard line. There, New York was stopped, but Haggerty tried a drop kick, which was partly blocked and recovered by Erickson on his 4-yard line. So they tried to kick a field goal. It got partly blocked, so it was no good. on the next play, but actually wound up working out for the best because the drop kick was going to be worth 3 points. Got partly blocked, but it got recovered at the 4-yard line. So this is where actually the Giants, instead of getting 3 points, actually wound up getting 7 points out of it. So the blocked extra field goal. I was going to say that's a combination of extra point and field goal. The blocked extra field goal. The blocked field goal actually turned into 7 points for the Giants. So on the next play, Erickson he tried a pass which Alexander intercepted and took across for the score. McBride added the extra point with a placement. Let's see here. Okay, so we have here's the starting lineups. Tilly Voss. Oh yeah, Tilly. He was the Giants' left end. So the Giants wound up winning 20-0. Steve Owens was the left tackle. He would be the Giants' head coach from 1931 to 1953. He was also their interim coach. Him and Benny Friedman, the final 2 games of the 1930 season. So he was the interim coach, Steve Owens. But he was the regular head coach from 1931 to 1953. So, but Steve Owens was the Giants' left tackle. Alexander was the left guard. Murtaugh was the center. Williams was the right guard. John Alexander. There was 2 Alexanders. Joe Doc Alexander, who was the player coach of the Giants in the 1926. Bob Folwell was the coach in 1925. 1926, Joe Doc Alexander was the head coach for the Giants. So there was Joe Alexander and John Alexander. So Joe Alexander, the head coach, was apparently the starting left guard, and John Alexander was the starting right tackle. Carney was the right end. Grigg was the quarterback. Hinkie Haynes was the left halfback. Koppisch was the right halfback, and McBride was the fullback. The Chicago team, Swanson was their left end. Weller was their left tackle. Lunds was their left guard. Claypool was their center. Brennan was their right guard. Gillis was their right tackle. Bloomer was their right end. Mahoney was their quarterback. McDonald was their left halfback. Erickson was their right halfback. And Francis was their fullback. Let's see here. What else we got here? It says we have substitutions. It says Bloomer went in for Mahoney. McElwain went in for Erickson, and Erickson went back in for McDonald, and Clay went in for Lunds. New York, we have Haggerty went in for Grigg, and Hogan went in for Koppisch. So that's the New York Times. I said I have a couple other ones here because each one, some of the newspapers have maybe almost like the identical. They just like share the same articles or whatever, but other ones have little differences to them. One point in hand was, some of them they have little discrepancies. Like when the Giants played the Canton Bulldogs, was on November 2nd, 1926, and it wound up being tied 7-7. There's a little discrepancy in a couple of those articles. One of them said that the ball. How Canton wound up scoring their touchdown in the final quarter. One of them was like the ball got tipped up in the air, and one of the Canton Bulldogs guys came racing down the field, and before it hit the ground, he caught it and raced in. Another one, I think, said that the Giants, intercepted the pass. The ball got knocked loose, was fumbled, and the guy came and picked it up and ran it. So sometimes you get discrepancies. You also get discrepancies sometimes as far as like the starting lineups or who the substitutes are. I've seen that a lot of discrepancies. So just, sometimes it's nice because you get different articles, so you get different accounts, versions of what happened during the game. But sometimes the discrepancies makes things a little bit confusing, as I said, especially when it comes to like the starting lineups or like who the substitutes were. Sometimes it's a little confusing. All right, so we have, let's see, this one. All right, this I think is from the New York Daily News. All right, what do we got here? Chicago and Haynes defeat Chicago Cardinals 20-0. Hinkie only bright spot of a dull afternoon. See, now this here too. Give me just a second, and there's a perfect point in hand here. In a slow and uninteresting game, which was as drab as the afternoon, the New York Giants and a fleet-footed Hinkie Haynes defeated the Chicago Cardinals by 20-0 yesterday at the Polo Grounds before some 5,000 spectators. Now, I think just what I just read, I think the New York Times said that there was about 10,000 spectators. So now also this one you have right here too. Hinkie Haynes scored 2 touchdowns on a forward pass and a 75-yard run and was the one bright light of the proceedings. In the other article, it said it was an 80-yard run. So it was either a 75 or an 80-yard run. It says after Haynes had scored in the first and third periods, the coach, Joe Doc Alexander, intercepted a Cardinal pass on the 10-yard line and turned it into a touchdown for the final score. The Cardinals had a fine aerial game, but the punch to score was missing. The Giants presented a weak defense for the forward pass, which put the Cards in their territory on several occasions. The playing of McBride and Carney also featured the home team, while O'Donnell, Mahoney, and Dunn led the Cards' offensive lineup. So you see, it said you see the little discrepancies there. It's it's a little confusing, and I think this is from the Chicago Tribune. I believe this is this other one here. This one's a little bit longer. And once again, this just goes. Once again, I'm gonna see. This proves my point exactly. Just give me just a second here. I'll read this. Let's see. Giants trample the Chicago Cardinals. Haynes registers 2 touchdowns in Polo Grounders 20-0 victory. Hinkie Haynes, Penn State's contribution to pro football, had another good day up at the Polo Grounds yesterday, and as a result, Coach Joe Alexander's Giants scored a 20-0 victory over the Chicago Cardinals before a crowd of 8,000 fans. So one newspaper said about 10. This one here says 8, and the one I just got done reading said there was 5,000 fans. Yeah. Right? And there's one more thing I got to point out here. Haynes scored 2 touchdowns for the Gotham's National Leaguers, intercepting a forward passing and running 35 yards to cross the. See, now this one here said he intercepted a forward pass and running 35 yards across the line in the first few minutes of the play and breaking loose in the third period to tear off on a 74-yard run. The other article I read said 75-yard run. The first article I read said it was an 80-yard run. But this one here also says intercepting a forward pass and running 35 yards to cross the line in the first few minutes of play. Now, the first article I read, it seemed like it was a pass from McBride to Hinkie Haynes, and he ran it in. So, very, it's different versions, different accounts of the games. Okay, the game was interesting throughout, although the Cardinals threatened the Giants' line only once. There was a marked contrast in the style of football used by the teams, and the result was a victory for the old school. I guess the old school means, because the Giants were running the ball, and the Cardinals were trying to pass the ball. The Giants played straight football, while the Chicagoans relied on a forward passing attack. The Cardinals gained about 150 yards via the air route, which back then is pretty good. 150 yards, that was pretty good back then. Let me tell you what. And you figure they scored, I got 150 yards passing, but they couldn't even score a field goal. But they could not complete one when the points hinged on its fate. So basically, once they got into the Giants' territory, things stagnated. They couldn't move the ball anymore. The Giants' defense stiffened. I guess Wink Martindale was sending some blitzes, and the Cardinals' offensive line couldn't handle it. The only real opportunity the Cards had to score was in the final period. After Alexander had intercepted a forward pass and lumbered his way over the goal line, the Cards woke up. Bloomer caught the kickoff and ran it back to the 48-yard line. 3 forward passes brought the ball to the Giants' 5-yard mark. The problem was at that time is that they needed touchdowns. So a field goal really wouldn't do them any good. But that was as far as they got for the New York team, steadied and took the ball from the Chicagoans on down. So the Cardinals got the ball down about the 5-yard line for the Giants, and they tried 4 times and couldn't get into the end zone. The Giants broke the ice right at the start. Kopech ran back the kickoff to the 22-yard line. McBride made 30 yards bucking the line. Then Haynes caught a forward and scurried over the goal for his first touchdown. So I don't understand, because in the beginning of this article, he intercepted a pass. I think it was this article. Haynes scored 2 touchdowns for the Gotham's National Leaguers, intercepting a forward pass and running 35 yards across intercepting a pass. So I don't know. He said in the beginning, he said he intercepted a pass, and then down here it said he caught a forward pass and scurried over the goal line for his first touchdown. McBride kicked the ball over the post for the extra point, but the referee ruled offside. The first article, it said there was a holding, which I guess negated the point after try. I mean, how nowadays, if there's a holding, you move the ball back 10 yards, they retry, they re-kick. I guess I'm not sure if they had a holding penalty, they moved it back, or if there was an offside, they moved it back, and they retried it and didn't get it, or once there's a penalty, it just eliminates the extra point try. I don't know. Forward passes featured the second period. The Cardinals began a march down the field when McDonald, Swanson, again McDonald, and then Mahoney caught forwards for a total of 70 yards on this one drive in the second period. At this time, the Giants were becoming accustomed to the style of Chicago passes and put a stop to it right there. Greggs fell on the ball, and the Giants fought their way out of danger. So I'm not sure what happened. He fell on the ball. I'm not sure if there was a fumble or what, but in the third period, McBride tried a placement kick, but the ball went wild. Chicago kicked at this point, and Haynes brought it to his 26-yard line. On second down, Hinkie took the pigskin, tucked it under his arm, and with good interference, dodged the 5 Ds of dodgeball. Dodge, dive, dip, duck, and dive. Dodge, dive, dip, duck, and dodge. The 5 Ds of dodgeball. Well, anyway, here, Hinkie took the pigskin, tucked it under his arm, and with good interference, dodged, sidestepped, and then sprinted to the goal with the whole Cardinal outfit at his heels. So here they're saying he got it to the 26-yard line, and then he scored there, so he went 74 yards. So by intercepting a forward pass in the last quarter, Alexander gave the Giants their last tally. The Cards were at their own 12-yard line when they attempted a pass, but the huge hulk of a coach, Joe, appeared, snatched the pigskin from its course, and with his long, lumbering steps, crossed the goal line. McBride kicked the extra point. So the Giants, they scored the 6 points in the first period. Then they scored a touchdown in the third period on Hinkie Haynes' touchdown. Then the Alexander interception, they scored a touchdown in the fourth period. Now here is like the substitutions. It says Hogan went in for the Giants. Hogan went in for Kopech. Haggerty went in for Greg. Cowboy Hill went in for McBride. Bednar went in for Williams. For the Chicago Cardinals, Dunn went in for Erickson. McElwain went in for Francis. Kiley went in for Gillis. Erickson went in for McDonald, and Green went in for Lux. So, yeah, it's very, very confusing. You get You know, the articles are, you know, I don't want to say misleading, but they all seem to have little discrepancies to them. And a lot of them, I said, it's amazing. It's something. Not always the start lines. Every now and then I'll see little discrepancies in the starting lineups from one paper to the next. But I see sometimes a lot of discrepancies as far as the substitutions. A lot of discrepancies. But you also see, as I said, in these articles, one says Hinkie Haynes ran 80 yards. One said he went 75 yards. One was another for 74 yards. The attendance was anywhere from 5,000 to 10,000 fans. Your guess is as good as mine, right? But once again, I mean, this was you know, a huge deal for the teams back then, was getting paid people to come in and watch the games. I know, especially in 1925, Tim Mara, March, Hara, and Gibson, and even like Tim's two sons, Jack and Wellington, right? They would give away free tickets just to get people in. But especially in 1925, you know, there was the Brickley Giants, right? But prior, there was the Brickley Giants, and they disbanded. They weren't around. But so in 1925, you know, the Giants were pretty much the only team in town, the only professional team in town, and they had to, you know, they had to get paying customers in there. So a lot of what they did, right, was they would give out free tickets just to get the people in and hopefully get them excited, you know, get them, you know, even if they went in there for nothing, they get, this is pretty cool. So next week when the Giants play, I'm going to want to come, I'll pay because this is pretty cool. So it was free this time. This is pretty interesting. I think I'm going to want to check this out. You know what I mean? So they would give away a lot of free tickets. So a lot of times there would be 10,000 people maybe show up, but out of 10,000 might only been maybe 5,000 that actually paid. So a lot of that was very misleading. It's like, oh, well, they got 10,000 people came in. No, it doesn't mean there was 10,000 paying customers, right? And you know, at the Polo Grounds, 10,000 people is like far from a sellout. Now I said the Giants on December 6, 1925, when Greg Grange and the Bears came, they had about 70,000 people in there. I mean, they had people in the aisles, they had people everywhere, right? So you can just go to show you how many people actually showed, you know, could fit in the Polo Ground. So when they only got like 10,000, 5,000, 8,000, 10,000 people, there's a lot of empty seats. And that was one of the big problems, was for a lot of teams back then, was getting enough people to come in and watch the games. It's not like it is nowadays, you know, where a lot of the games are just straight up sold out. And if some games aren't sold out, there's maybe 5, 6, 7, maybe 10,000 seats, maybe at the most, that aren't sold. But, you know, between the television rights and the guy selling the concessions, you know, $35 for a hot dog, $800 for a beer. So, you know, the NFL teams are doing pretty good, even if they don't sell out. But it wasn't like that back then. You only had a few thousand people show up. You know, that's why a lot of teams went under back then. They just couldn't afford to stay afloat. You know, so all right. Well, that pretty much wraps it up. So the Giants, with this win, okay, they wound up. Let's see. After this win here, they were 4-3-1. Right, and they were on. There we go. They were on their way. They were gonna win. They will win what? 1, 2, 3, 4. They will win. At their final 5 games, they would go 4-1. Their next game was going to be on. You know, once again, I mean, this just goes to show you, the Giants played. They played November 2nd. They played here November 7th. Then they're going to be playing. This was obviously Sunday, November 7th. Then they played. The next game is going to be this Thursday coming up, November 11th. Then they played another game on Sunday. So between the 7th, the 11th, and the 14th, in like basically a period of 8 days, right? Sunday to Sunday, 8 days, they played 3 games in 8 days. So the next game coming up is it'll be home against the Duluth Eskimos, Ernie Nevers and the Duluth Eskimos, on Thursday, November 11th, 1926. And that game would be a very, very good one. So the Giants here with this win went wound up going. Will be 4-3-1, and kind of pretty much out of the any chance for the championship. Because back then, if you lost like 3 or 4 games or so, you could pretty much kiss the season. As far as winning the championship, you could pretty much kiss the season goodbye. And as I said, with this one, they were 4-3-1. So their season, they were just playing to make some money, and they were just playing for some pride. So, but the Giants wound up with a very resounding 20-0 win over the Chicago Cardinals. So that's what happened on this date, November 7th, 1926, in New York Football Giants history. See you next time.